The first time Kai saw Arya smile, something fluttered in his chest. It wasn't supposed to happen. Not here on Aurora 7, the massive space station serving as a crossroads for a dozen different species. Certainly not to him. A maintenance engineer who preferred the quiet company of machines to the complexity of interspecies diplomacy. Kai had been elbow-deep in a ventilation panel when she appeared, her translucent skin shimmering with faint blue undertones as she handed him the plasma wrench he'd been searching for all morning. "You looked like you needed this," she said, her voice carrying the melodic lilt characteristic of Etherians. Her eyes, deep pools of silver with flecks that seemed to drift like stars, crinkled at the corners as her lips curved upward. That smile. It was both foreign and familiar, both alien and achingly human. "Thanks," he managed to reply, taking the tool with a nod. His fingers brushed against hers, cool to the touch, like morning dew. "I've been looking everywhere for this." "I know," she said. "I've been watching you search for 23 minutes. Kai raised an eyebrow. "And you're just helping me now?" Her skin rippled with a flash of violet. Embarrassment, he would later learn, before returning to its default translucent blue. "I was observing. Your searching pattern was inefficient but interesting." With that peculiar statement, she turned and walked away. Her movements fluid like water in zero gravity, though the station's artificial gravity kept her firmly grounded. Kai watched her leave, that smile lingering in his mind long after she had disappeared around the corner. It wasn't until 3 days later that he learned her name. Aurora 7 was a marvel of interstellar engineering, a sprawling complex of interconnected modules, habitation rings, and docking bays that housed over 5,000 permanent residents and twice as many visitors at any given time. Built at the intersection of 7 major trade routes, it was the galaxy's premier neutral zone for diplomacy, commerce, and cultural exchange. Maintaining its life support systems alone required a team of 20 engineers working in rotating shifts. Kai preferred the night cycle shifts. The station never truly slept, but the reduced activity allowed him to work in relative peace, moving through the arterial corridors and maintenance tunnels with minimal interruption. His quarters in the Earth sector were comfortable but sterile. Standard issue furniture, a small collection of books, physical ones, a rarity in space, and a single potted succulent that stubbornly refused to die despite his sporadic care. He was making his way through the recycled air filtration center when the alarms began to blare. Red emergency lights bathed the corridor in an ominous glow as the station's AI announced a containment breach in Section 7B. Nothing catastrophic. The station's integrity wasn't compromised, but the air recyclers in that section had malfunctioned, causing oxygen levels to drop dangerously. Kai sprinted down the corridor, toolbox clutched tightly in one hand. Section 7B housed primarily non-human residents, many of whom had different respiratory requirements than humans. A recycler malfunction could be fatal for some species within minutes. When he arrived, he found the control panel already open, with slender blue-tinged fingers moving deftly among the circuitry. "You'll need to bypass the primary coupling," he said automatically, kneeling beside the figure. She turned. It was her again, and that smile flashed briefly. "I was waiting for you to say that." Together, they worked in synchronized silence, her hands moving with surprising technical skill for an Etherian. Her species was known for their artistic and diplomatic capabilities, not engineering prowess. "I'm Kai," he said as they rerouted power to the backup systems. "I know," she replied, not looking up from her work. "Your identification is on your uniform." He chuckled despite the urgency of the situation. "And you are?" Her skin pulsed with a warm golden hue for just a moment. "Arya." The recyclers hummed back to life, and the emergency alerts ceased their wailing. In the sudden quiet, Kai became acutely aware of how close they were sitting, shoulders nearly touching in the narrow maintenance alcove. How did you know about the recycler failure? He asked. Do you live in this section? Arya shook her head. Her translucent hair, something between liquid and light, shifting like a gentle current. I was passing by. I heard the system's rhythm change before the alarms triggered. You heard it? Kai couldn't hide his surprise. The subtle shifts in machinery were something he'd trained for years to detect. She tapped her ear delicately. Etherians have sensitive hearing, especially to patterns and disruptions in them. She stood gracefully, gathering the tools they'd used. Your species relies too heavily on alarms and warnings. Sometimes the machines speak long before they scream. With that enigmatic statement, she handed him back his plasma cutter and turned to leave. Wait, Kai called after her. Do you work in engineering too? I haven't seen you in our section before. Arya paused, looking back over her shoulder. I'm a cultural liaison, but machines. Her skin rippled with patterns that reminded Kai of code sequences. Machines are easier to understand than people, don't you think? Before he could respond, she was gone, her form disappearing into the now normally lit corridor. Kai sat back on his heels, a strange warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the restored environmental systems. That night, for the first time in months, Kai found himself unable to sleep. His thoughts kept returning to Arya, to her smile, to the way her skin changed colors with her emotions, to the surprising dexterity with which she'd handled complex Earth technology. What he didn't know then was that this encounter would be the first of many, each one drawing him deeper into a relationship that would challenge everything he thought he knew about love, duty, and the vast divides between worlds. The next time Kai saw Arya, it was no accident. He'd just finished his shift when he spotted her in the station's central atrium, a vast, open space where the ceiling was a transparent dome, revealing the star-studded blackness of space. She stood alone, gazing upward, her skin reflecting tiny pinpoints of light, as if she herself were made of stars. He hesitated, unsure if he should approach. Etherians were known for their reserved nature around other species, despite serving as diplomats throughout the galaxy. Their home planet, Etheria, remained largely a mystery to humans, a gas giant with floating crystal cities hidden among perpetual clouds. Before he could decide, she turned, as if sensing his presence. That smile appeared again, and she beckoned him over with a graceful motion of her hand. The stars look different from here, she said as he joined her. Neither like they appear from Earth, nor from Etheria. You've been to Earth? Kai asked, surprised. Once, for a diplomatic conference in the United Nations spaceport. It was... Her skin rippled with contemplative lavender hues. Heavy. Your gravity. Your atmosphere. Everything felt so dense. So permanent. Kai nodded. I imagine Etheria is quite different. Our cities float among the clouds. They shift with the atmospheric currents. Nothing stays in one place for long. Her voice carried a hint of nostalgia. It teaches us that permanence is an illusion. That sounds beautiful, Kai said, trying to imagine a life where even one's home was in constant motion. It is. But sometimes... She trailed off, her skin dimming slightly. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to build something that lasts. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching as a transport ship departed from one of the station's docking arms, its engines flaring briefly before it disappeared into the darkness. Would you like to see something? Kai asked suddenly, surprising himself with his boldness. Arya tilted her head curiously, those silver eyes studying him. What kind of something? Something permanent, or at least as permanent as humans can make things in space. She smiled again. Was it his imagination, or did her skin glow a little brighter, and nodded. Lead the way. Kai took her to a section of the station few people visited, the original core module. While Aurora 7 had expanded over decades, Its heart remained unchanged, the first human-built structure at this particular point in space, now surrounded by layers of newer construction. "This is where it all began," Kai explained, as they entered a small, hexagonal room with thick viewport windows. "The first module, launched almost 40 years ago. Everything else grew from here." Arya moved slowly around the space, her fingers trailing lightly over the aged metal walls. "It feels full, like it contains memories." "It does, in a way. 3 generations of engineers have maintained this station. Some were born here, lived their entire lives here." "And you?" She turned to face him. "Were you born among the stars?" Kai shook his head. "Earthborn. Beijing Arcology. I came to space for university and never wanted to go back. Something about the vastness out here. It makes more sense to me than the crowded cities back home." "Seeking solitude among thousands," Arya murmured. "Humans are fascinating contradictions." "What about you?" Kai asked. "What brought you to Aurora 7? Her skin darkened momentarily, flashing deep indigo before lightening again. "Duty, opportunity, curiosity." She approached one of the viewports, looking out at the distant stars. "And perhaps a desire to understand what permanence might feel like." Something in her tone suggested there was more to her story. But Kai didn't press. Instead, he pointed out the original commander's console, now preserved as a historical artifact, and explained how the station's first inhabitants had lived in this single module for nearly a year, while the rest was constructed around them. As they explored the old core together, Kai found himself watching Arya, as much as showing her the historical features. The way her expressions shifted, subtle but readable despite her alien features. The careful way she examined everything, as if committing it to memory. The questions she asked, thoughtful and precise, showing a keen understanding of engineering principles that seemed at odds with her diplomatic role. When they finally left, Arya paused at the threshold, looking back at the old module. "Thank you," she said softly, "for sharing this piece of your history with me." "Maybe sometime you could tell me more about Etheria," Kai suggested, trying to sound casual. Her smile returned, but there was something wistful in it now. "Perhaps, though some things are difficult to describe to those who haven't experienced them." "I'm a quick study," he replied with a grin. Arya's skin shimmered with amusement. "I've noticed that about you, Kai." She said his name carefully, as if testing how it felt. "Until next time." As she walked away, Kai realized with a start that he was already looking forward to whenever that next time might be. Over the following weeks, next time became regular time, as Kai and Arya fell into the habit of seeking each other out during their overlapping free hours. What began as chance encounters evolved into deliberate meetings, shared meals in the station's diverse dining facilities, walks through the botanical gardens that supplied fresh oxygen and produce, and quiet conversations in observation lounges during shift changes. Kai learned that Arya had been on Aurora 7 for nearly 6 months, part of an extended diplomatic mission to strengthen relations between Etherians and the various species that frequented the station. Her official duties involved cultural translation and conflict resolution, using the Etherians' natural empathic abilities to smooth interactions between species with vastly different communication styles and social norms. "It's exhausting sometimes," she confessed, during one of their meetings. They were sitting in a small alcove in the botanical gardens, surrounded by genetically modified plants that bloomed in the artificial day-night cycle. Being attuned to everyone's emotions, trying to bridge gaps that seem impossible to cross. "Is that why you spend time with me?" Kai asked, half joking but genuinely curious. "Because I'm simple and uncomplicated." Arya's skin rippled with patterns he'd come to recognize as amusement. "You are many things, Kai, but simple is not one of them." Her expression grew more serious. No, I seek your company because you're restful. You don't demand anything from me. Not even conversation, he teased. Especially not conversation, her smile returned. You're comfortable with silence. Do you know how rare that is? Most beings feel compelled to fill every quiet moment with words. Kai nodded thoughtfully. Growing up in the arcologies, silence was precious. Too many people. Too little space. Out here, he gestured toward the stars, visible through the garden's transparent ceiling. There's all the quiet you could want. And yet you chose to work on a station with thousands of others. I like knowing the quiet is a choice, not a necessity, he admitted. What about you? What's it like growing up on Etheria? At this, Arya's skin darkened slightly, shifting to deeper blues. It was a reaction Kai had noticed whenever he asked directly about her homeworld or personal history. A momentary withdrawal. Communal, she said finally. Etherians are deeply connected to one another. Our cities aren't just places we live. They're extensions of ourselves. The crystal structures respond to our collective emotions, changing color and form subtly throughout the day. That sounds beautiful, Kai said. It is. But it also means there are few secrets. Little privacy. Everything is shared. Thoughts, feelings, experiences. She looked at him, her silver eyes reflecting the garden lights. That's why space travel was so revolutionary for us. The first Etherians who left our atmosphere experienced true solitude for the first time in our species' history. Was it terrifying? Kai asked. Being suddenly alone with your thoughts? For some. For others, it was liberating. Her skin pulsed with gentle waves of color. We discovered parts of ourselves we never knew existed when we weren't constantly surrounded by the emotional echoes of others. And which was it for you? Kai asked softly. Terrifying or liberating? Arya was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. Both, she finally answered. Like most important experiences in life, as days turned into weeks, Kai found his maintenance shifts increasingly punctuated by thoughts of Arya. He'd catch himself smiling at the memory of something she'd said, or wondering what shade her skin would turn if he showed her a particularly beautiful view of the nearby nebula. More than once, he'd been startled out of these reveries by colleagues, asking if he was feeling all right, an unusual question for someone normally so focused on his work. The truth was, he wasn't sure if he was all right. Something was happening to him, something both wonderful and frightening. Each time he saw Arya smile, each time her skin brightened at his approach, each moment of shared silence or animated conversation, they all fed a growing warmth in his chest that he couldn't ignore. He was falling in love with her. The realization didn't come as a sudden epiphany, but as a gradual acceptance of something he'd known for weeks. It terrified him. Not because of their different species. Interspecies relationships, while uncommon, weren't unheard of on Aurora 7, but because he had no idea if Etherians even experienced love the way humans did. Their emotional lives were so different, so much more communal and interconnected. What if what he felt had no translation in her world? Worse, what if she did understand and didn't feel the same? Kai had never been particularly skilled at navigating romantic relationships, even with other humans. His previous attempts at love had fizzled out, victims of his tendency to retreat into his work when emotions became too complex. How could he possibly navigate something as complicated as interspecies romance? And yet, the thought of not trying, of letting Arya return to Etheria at the end of her mission without ever knowing how he felt, that seemed worse than any rejection he might face. So, Kai did what he always did when confronted with a complex problem. He studied. He spent his free time researching Etherian culture and biology, reading accounts from the few humans who had visited their world, and discreetly asking questions of the station's xenobiologists. What he learned was both encouraging and daunting. Etherians did form deep emotional attachments, but their expression of these bonds was different from human norms. Their changing skin colors were involuntary expressions of their emotional states, something they couldn't hide from other Etherians, which had led to a culture with different concepts of emotional privacy. They valued honesty above almost everything else, considering it the foundation of all meaningful connections. Armed with this knowledge, Kai resolved to be honest with Arya, even if it meant risking their friendship. He began planning how and when to tell her, searching for the perfect moment, the right words. But before he could find that moment, Aurora 7 faced a crisis that would push both of them to their limits and force emotions to the surface, whether they were ready or not. The first sign of trouble came during a routine system check. Kai was reviewing the station's computational network when he noticed anomalous patterns in the data flow, subtle irregularities that wouldn't trigger automated alarms, but that his experienced eye recognized as potentially problematic. He tracked the anomalies to their source, the primary biomechanical interfaces that connected the station's computer systems to its living components. Aurora 7, like most modern space habitats, used hybrid technology, traditional computers working alongside engineered organic components that were more adaptable and self-healing than purely mechanical systems. The organic components were showing signs of stress. Kai reported his findings to the chief engineer, an experienced Martian named Sophia, who had been running the station's maintenance division for over a decade. "Could be nothing," she said, reviewing his data. "But I don't like these patterns. Keep monitoring it, and let me know if anything changes." 3 days later, everything changed. Kai was in the middle of his shift when every alert in his section began blaring simultaneously. The station's AI announced a station-wide emergency. Critical systems were failing across multiple sectors. Life support, gravity control, communication networks, all showing rapidly degrading performance. He rushed to the central engineering hub, where chaos reigned. Engineers from every species were shouting over each other, displays flashing with critical alerts, and in the center of it all, Sophia was trying to restore order. "Listen up," she yelled, her powerful Martian voice cutting through the noise. "We're dealing with a tech plague, a viral program that's infected our biomechanical systems. It's spreading through the organic components and causing them to malfunction. I need teams on every critical system right now." Tech plagues were rare, but devastating. Self-replicating programs that targeted the biological components of hybrid systems, causing them to degrade and eventually fail. Unlike purely digital viruses, they couldn't simply be quarantined and deleted. They had to be treated like actual diseases. Kai found himself assigned to the life support systems, which were showing alarming signs of failure. As he raced toward his assigned sector, a familiar voice called his name. "Kai, wait!" He turned to see Arya hurrying toward him, her skin pulsing with urgent orange tones he'd never seen before. "Arya? What are you doing here? This is an engineering emergency." "I know," she cut him off. "That's why I'm here. Etherians have experience with biomechanical interfaces. Our cities use similar technology. I've been authorized to assist the engineering teams." Kai didn't have time to question this unexpected revelation. "Come with me, then. Life support systems are critical." Together, they raced through the corridors, which were now filled with anxious residents being directed to secure areas by station security. When they reached the Life Support Control Center, the situation was even worse than Kai had feared. The atmospheric processors were failing, causing dangerous fluctuations in oxygen levels throughout the station. "We need to isolate the infected components," Kai said, scanning the diagnostic displays. "But first, we have to stabilize the oxygen levels before anyone suffocates." "I can help with that," Arya said, moving to a secondary console. Her fingers flew across the controls with surprising expertise. If we reroute through the backup systems and create a containment field around the primary processors, we can buy some time. For the next several hours, they worked tirelessly alongside other engineers, fighting to keep the station's vital systems functioning while specialists developed a countermeasure for the tech plague. Kai was amazed by Arya's technical knowledge, far beyond what he would have expected from a cultural liaison. During a brief lull, as they waited for a system reboot to complete, Kai couldn't help but ask the question that had been nagging at him. "How do you know so much about our systems? I thought you were a diplomat." Arya's skin flickered with hesitation before settling into a calm blue. "I am a diplomat. But before that, I was an engineer on Etheria. Our crystal cities require constant maintenance and calibration. The principles aren't so different from your technology." "Why didn't you tell me?" She looked away briefly. "It's complicated. My engineering work was part of a different life. Before I was assigned to diplomatic service." Before Kai could press further, the console beeped, indicating the reboot was complete. They returned to work, the conversation temporarily shelved as they focused on the crisis at hand. The tech plague proved stubborn. For 3 days, the entire engineering staff worked around the clock, snatching brief periods of rest when possible. Kai and Arya remained partnered, their complementary skills making them one of the most effective teams addressing the crisis. They moved from system to system, stabilizing, isolating, treating. On the 4th day, the station's medical and engineering teams finally developed an effective countermeasure, a combination of nanobots and engineered bacteriophages that could identify and neutralize the infected components without damaging the healthy ones. As the treatment was deployed and systems began to recover, exhaustion hit Kai like a physical force. He'd been running on stimulants and adrenaline for days, barely sleeping, eating whatever could be consumed quickly between emergencies. He found a quiet corner in one of the now stabilized maintenance rooms and slumped against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor. Arya found him there moments later, her own exhaustion evident in the muted tones of her normally vibrant skin. Without a word, she sat beside him, their shoulders touching lightly. "We did it," Kai said softly. "The station will recover." "Yes," she agreed, "though it will take time for all systems to return to normal." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of quiet that comes after a shared battle, intimate and understanding. "You were amazing," Kai finally said. "I've never seen anyone adapt to our systems so quickly, understand them so intuitively." Arya's skin rippled with modest lavender. "You weren't so bad yourself, for a human." He laughed, the sound surprising him after days of tension. High praise from an Etherian engineer. "Former engineer," she corrected gently. "Why former?" Kai asked, turning to look at her profile. "You clearly have a gift for it." Arya was quiet for so long that Kai thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost wistful. "On Etheria, we don't choose our professions the way humans do. We're assigned, based on aptitude and the needs of our communities. I showed technical skill, so I was trained as an engineer." Her skin darkened slightly. "But then I was reassigned to diplomatic service. You didn't have a choice?" "Choice is different for us." She turned to face him, her silver eyes serious. "Our society values the collective above the individual. We serve where we are needed." Kai tried to imagine living that way, having his path determined entirely by others' assessment of his usefulness. The concept was alien to him, raised as he was in a culture that celebrated individual choice above almost everything else. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "Engineering?" Her skin pulsed with warm amber, the closest thing to a smile her species could express through their chromatic emotions. "Sometimes, though I've found diplomatic work has its own rewards." She paused, then added softly, Like meeting interesting humans who show me old space modules. Kai felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with exhaustion. There was something in her tone, in the way her skin brightened when she looked at him, that gave him hope. "Arya," he began, his heart suddenly racing. "There's something I've been wanting to tell you." The station's communication system crackled to life, interrupting him. "All engineering personnel, report to your section chiefs for debriefing. Repeat. All engineering personnel report for debriefing." Arya stood gracefully, despite her obvious fatigue. "Duty calls," she said, offering her hand to help him up. Kai took it, feeling the cool smoothness of her skin against his. As he rose to his feet, they stood face to face, closer than they'd ever been before. For a breathless moment, he thought about ignoring the summons, about finally telling her how he felt. But the moment passed. They had responsibilities, and the station was still recovering from a major crisis. His confession would have to wait. "We should go," he said reluctantly. Arya nodded, but didn't immediately move away. "Kai," she said, her voice carrying an unusual weight. "There's something I need to tell you too. Something important. But not now. Not like this. Can we meet later? At the observation deck in the Earth sector?" "Of course," he agreed, curiosity and hope mingling in his chest. "After the debriefing?" "No. Tomorrow. I need time." Her skin flickered with complex patterns he couldn't interpret. "Meet me there at the beginning of the night cycle." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Kai standing there with 1,000 questions and the tantalizing possibility that she might feel the same way he did. The debriefing was long and exhaustive, followed by additional hours of system checks and documentation. By the time Kai finally made it back to his quarters, he was beyond exhaustion. He collapsed onto his bed, not even bothering to remove his uniform, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. When he awoke, 14 hours later, his first thought was of Arya and their planned meeting. His second thought was a surge of panic when he realized how long he'd slept. The night cycle would begin in less than an hour. Rushing through a sonic shower and a change of clothes, Kai tried to calm his racing thoughts. What did Arya want to tell him? Was it possible she shared his feelings? Or was it something else entirely? Perhaps news that her diplomatic mission was ending, that she would be returning to Etheria? The thought of her leaving sent a cold spike of dread through him. He'd known from the beginning that her assignment was temporary, but somehow, he'd avoided thinking about what that would mean for their relationship, or whatever this connection between them was. As he made his way to the observation deck, Kai resolved that whatever Arya had to tell him, he would be honest about his own feelings. If their time together was limited, all the more reason not to waste it in uncertainty. The observation deck was one of his favorite places on the station, a large, circular platform extending out from the Earth sector, with panoramic windows offering an unobstructed view of space. Unlike the central atrium, which was always bustling with activity, the observation deck was designed for quiet contemplation, with comfortable seating arranged to take advantage of the spectacular view. When he arrived, the deck was empty, save for a single figure standing at the farthest window. Arya's back was to him, her translucent form silhouetted against the starfield beyond. Even from a distance, Kai could see that her skin was shifting through colors in rapid, almost agitated patterns, deep blues, flashes of violet, occasional pulses of a golden hue he associated with her moments of greatest animation. She was nervous, he realized. Whatever she had to tell him, it wasn't easy for her. "Arya," he called softly as he approached. She turned, and for a moment, her skin settled into the warm, amber glow that he'd come to think of as her smile. But it quickly faded, replaced by more complex patterns. "Kai," she said, her voice carrying an undercurrent of emotion he couldn't quite identify. "Thank you for coming." "Of course," he replied, moving to stand beside her at the window. Is everything all right? You seem concerned. Arya looked out at the stars, her silver eyes reflecting their distant light. I received a message from Etheria today. My mission here is being modified. Kai felt his heart sink. You're leaving? Not immediately, she said, turning to face him fully. But soon, within 2 planetary cycles. 2 months, in Earth time. It seemed both an eternity and no time at all. I see, Kai said, struggling to keep his disappointment from showing. Is that what you wanted to tell me? Arya's skin darkened, rippling with indigo waves. Partly, but there's more. She took a deep breath, a strangely human gesture that she must have adopted during her time on the station. Kai, there's something about Etherians that you should know. Something important that affects any relationship we might have. Kai's heart leaped at the word relationship, but he forced himself to focus on her words, not his hopes. I'm listening. On Etheria, she began, her voice taking on a formal quality, as if she were reciting something long memorized. We have a ritual called the soul bond. It's not just a cultural practice. It's a biological imperative for our species. When we reach a certain age, we are matched with a compatible partner and undergo the bonding ceremony. She paused, her skin flickering with nervous energy. The bond is permanent. It creates a psychic connection between the paired Etherians, allowing them to share thoughts and emotions directly. It's how our society maintains its cohesion, its sense of collective purpose. Kai nodded slowly, trying to understand. Like an arranged marriage? In some ways, Arya conceded, but far more profound. The bond literally reshapes our neural pathways. Once bonded, an Etherian cannot form a deep emotional connection with anyone else. Their brain chemistry won't allow it. The implications hit Kai like a physical blow. And you? Are you? Not yet, she said quickly. But soon. The message I received today, it was notification that my bond match has been selected. When I return to Etheria, the ceremony will take place. Kai felt as if the artificial gravity had suddenly increased, weighing him down. I see, he managed to say, though his mind was reeling. And there's no choice in the matter? Arya's skin pulsed with deep, sorrowful blue. The matching process takes into account our preferences and personalities. But once the match is made, it is considered final. To refuse would be... She searched for the word. Unthinkable. It would mean exile from our society, severance from all family and community bonds. But what if you've already formed a connection with someone else? Kai asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before the bond, her eyes met his, and in them, he saw a pain that matched his own. That's why I needed to tell you this now, Kai. Because I've felt something growing between us. Something that, in another life, I might have wanted to explore. Her skin rippled with amber warmth, even as her expression remained solemn. But I can't. Once I undergo the bond, any feelings I have for you will fade. The bond overwrites previous emotional attachments. The observation deck seemed to spin around Kai as he processed her words. Not only was she leaving, but if he understood correctly, the person who would return to Etheria wouldn't even remember caring for him. You'll forget me? He asked, his voice cracking slightly. Not forget, she corrected gently. I'll remember you. Remember our time together. But the emotional significance will be diminished. Like remembering a dream after waking. Kai turned away, unable to bear the compassion in her silver eyes. He stared out at the stars, trying to make sense of this revelation. Part of him wanted to rage against the unfairness of it all, to demand how any society could force such a thing on its members. But another part understood that he was viewing this through a human lens, imposing his cultural values on a species with a fundamentally different way of being. "Why tell me this now?" he finally asked, still looking at the stars. "Why not just let things continue as they were until you left?" He heard Arya move closer, felt the subtle change in the air that signaled her presence directly behind him. "Because you deserve honesty," she said softly. "Because what we have, whatever it is, matters to me. And because—" her voice faltered for the first time since he'd known her. "Because I needed you to understand why I can't let it become more, even though part of me wants to." Kai turned to face her again, his decision made in that moment of vulnerability. If their time was limited, if her feelings for him were destined to fade, then he had nothing to lose by being honest. "I love you," he said, the words simple and clear in the quiet of the observation deck. Arya went perfectly still, her skin freezing in a pattern of shocked violet, before slowly, painfully fading to a deep, sorrowful blue. "Kai," she whispered, his name sounding like a plea. "You don't have to say anything," he continued, needing to get the words out now that he'd started. "I know it doesn't change anything. I know you're leaving, that you'll undergo this bond. But I needed you to know. I've never felt this way about anyone before, human or otherwise. And even if you forget, even if your feelings fade, I'll remember for both of us." "You can't love me," Arya said, her voice barely audible. "Because I'm going to bond with another, and our policies don't allow exceptions." Her words struck him like physical blows, each one driving home the impossibility of what he felt. And yet, despite everything, he couldn't regret telling her. "I understand," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "And I don't expect anything from you. I just couldn't let you leave without knowing." They stood facing each other in the starlight, a vast gulf of cultural and biological differences between them, yet connected by something neither had anticipated when they first met. "What happens now?" Kai finally asked. Arya's skin shifted through several colors before settling into a calm, determined blue. "I have 2 months before I must return to Etheria. We can continue as we have been, friends, colleagues." "Pretending I didn't just tell you I love you?" Kai asked, a hint of bitterness creeping into his voice. "No," she said firmly, acknowledging it, but also acknowledging the reality of our situation. She reached out hesitantly, her cool fingers brushing against his hand. "I value what we have, Kai. I don't want to lose these last weeks together because of what cannot be." Kai looked down at her hand touching his, then back up at her face. Her expression was open, vulnerable in a way he'd never seen before. Despite everything, he couldn't bring himself to pull away. "Okay," he said softly. "Friends, then, for as long as we have." But even as he agreed to these terms, a part of him refused to accept the inevitability of their separation. There had to be another way, some alternative to this painful farewell. And in the days that followed, that stubborn part of him began to form a plan, one that would either save their future together or destroy any chance of even preserving their friendship. The weeks following their conversation on the observation deck passed in a strange limbo. On the surface, Kai and Arya continued their routine, shared meals, walks through the station, technical discussions that blended their different perspectives. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, everything had changed. Kai found himself treasuring each moment with her, mentally cataloging her expressions, the shifting colors of her skin, the melodic lilt of her voice, all the things he feared forgetting once she was gone. He researched Etherian culture with renewed intensity, searching for any loophole, any precedent that might offer a way around the soul bond's finality. Arya, for her part, seemed determined to make their remaining time meaningful. She shared more about her homeworld than ever before, teaching Kai phrases in the musical Etherian language, explaining the complex philosophies that guided her people. Her skin often pulsed with bittersweet amber when they were together, a visual indication of emotions she never quite put into words. 2 weeks after their conversation on the observation deck, Kai was summoned to a meeting with Dr. Mara, the station's chief medical officer, a tall, slender woman with close-cropped silver hair and the distinctive copper-tinted skin of Mars colonists. Dr. Mara had been on Aurora 7 longer than almost anyone else, serving as both physician and unofficial counselor to the station's diverse population. "You wanted to see me, Doctor?" Kai asked, as he entered her office, a warm space filled with plants and artifacts from dozens of worlds. "Yes. Kai, please, sit down." She gestured to a comfortable chair opposite her desk. "This isn't an official meeting, more of a concerned conversation." Kai sat, suddenly wary. "What's this about?" Dr. Mara leaned forward, her amber eyes kind but direct. "It's about you and Daria. Word travels fast on a space station, especially when it involves one of our best engineers and an Etherian diplomat." Kai felt his face warm. "I didn't realize we were station gossip." "Not gossip," she corrected gently. "Concern. Several colleagues have noticed you seem distracted lately. And given the timing of these changes, right after Arya received her bond notification, it wasn't difficult to connect the dots. With all due respect, Doctor, I don't see how my personal life is relevant to my work performance." Kai tried to keep his tone neutral, though irritation flared at having his private feelings become a matter of official concern. "It's not about your performance, which remains excellent," Dr. Mara assured him. "It's about your well-being. I've been on this station for 23 years. Kai, I've seen interspecies relationships bloom and fade. Some end beautifully. Others—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Others leave lasting damage." "I appreciate your concern," Kai said stiffly. "But I'm aware of the situation. Arya has explained everything about the soul bond." "Has she?" Dr. Mara raised an eyebrow. "Did she tell you what happens to Etherians who resist the bond? Or to non-Etherians who try to interfere with it?" Kai's irritation gave way to curiosity. "No. What does happen?" Dr. Mara sighed, leaning back in her chair. 8 years ago, we had an Etherian scientist on the station. She fell in love with a Centaurian physicist. When her bond notification came, she refused to return to Etheria." The doctor's expression darkened. "The Etherian diplomatic corps sent representatives to escort her home. When she still refused, they declared her emotionally compromised and forcibly sedated her." "They can do that?" Kai asked, horrified. "Under interstellar law, yes. The Etherian government classifies bond refusal as a medical emergency, a form of temporary insanity that requires intervention. Her Centaurian partner tried to prevent them from taking her." Dr. Mara shook her head sadly. "He was arrested for interfering with Etherian cultural practices, nearly lost his scientific credentials. And the Etherian woman? She was returned to Etheria, underwent the bond ceremony, and later returned to scientific work, though never again on Aurora 7. Dr. Mara leaned forward again, her gaze intense. "Kai, I'm telling you this because I see the look in your eyes. You're planning something, thinking there must be a way around this. I need you to understand. There isn't." Kai sat in stunned silence, processing this information. He'd known the soul bond was serious, but he hadn't realized the lengths to which Etherian society would go to enforce it. "So that's it?" he finally asked, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. "I'm just supposed to accept that in 2 months. Arya will leave, undergo this bond, and return as someone who barely remembers caring about me." "Not accept," Dr. Mara said gently. "Understand. There's a difference. She reached across the desk, briefly touching his hand. I'm not telling you this to be cruel, Kai, but false hope can be more damaging than hard truth. Kai nodded mechanically, his mind still reeling. Thank you for the information, Doctor. Is there anything else? She studied him for a moment, then shook her head. No, just be careful, Kai, with your heart and with hers. As he left the medical office, Kai felt a new weight settling over him. Dr. Mara's story had shaken him, forcing him to confront the reality of what he was up against. This wasn't just a matter of convincing Arya to choose him. It was an entire society, an entire legal framework that defined her refusal as illness rather than choice. And yet, some stubborn part of him refused to give up entirely. There had to be a way, not to fight the system directly, perhaps, but to work within it, to find a compromise that would allow them to be together without forcing Arya to sacrifice her connection to her people. That evening, Kai sought out Jor, the Etherian operations officer who served as the senior representative of his species on the station. Unlike Arya, with her diplomat's warmth and adaptability, Jor was reserved and formal, his skin rarely displaying the chromatic emotions that made Arya so expressive. Engineer Kai, Jor acknowledged when Kai found him in the station's administrative sector. How may I assist you? I was hoping to speak with you about Etherian cultural practices, Kai said, trying to keep his tone casual and scholarly. Specifically, the soul bond. Jor's skin darkened slightly, the only indication of his surprise. An unusual topic of interest for a human engineer. May I ask why? Professional curiosity, Kai lied. As you know, I work closely with Arya on various systems. She mentioned the bond recently, and I realized how little I understand about such an important aspect of your culture. I see. Jor gestured for Kai to follow him into a small meeting room, away from the bustle of the administrative hub. Once they were seated, he continued. The soul bond is central to Etherian society, both a biological imperative and a cultural cornerstone. What specifically would you like to know? Kai had prepared his questions carefully, wanting to seem like an interested colleague rather than a desperate lover. Arya mentioned that the bond overwrites previous emotional attachments. Is that always the case? Are there no exceptions? Jor's expression remained neutral, but his skin pulsed once with deep indigo. Suspicion, perhaps. The bond does not precisely overwrite emotions. Rather, it creates a neural pathway so profound that previous connections pale in comparison. Think of it like staring at the sun after such brightness. Other lights seem dim by comparison. But the person still remembers those previous connections, Kai pressed. Yes, though their emotional significance is diminished. Jor studied Kai carefully. These are unusually specific questions. Engineer Kai. Kai quickly changed tack. What about the timing? Is there flexibility in when an Etherian must undergo the bond? Some, Jor conceded. Traditionally, the ceremony occurs within 3 cycles of the match notification. However, in cases where the Etherian is serving in a critical capacity off-world, extensions may be granted. His skin rippled with formal blue. Liaison Arya, for example, has been granted an extension to complete her current diplomatic assignment before returning for her ceremony. Hope flared briefly in Kai's chest. So postponement is possible. Postponement, yes. Cancellation, no. Jor's voice hardened slightly. The bond is not optional. Engineer Kai, it is fundamental to our biology and society. What about bonding with non-Etherians? Kai asked, unable to stop himself. Has that ever happened? At this, Jor's skin darkened dramatically, pulsing with sharp indigo patterns. It has been attempted, he said, his voice cool. With universally tragic results. Non-Etherian nervous systems cannot support the bond. Those who have tried have suffered severe neurological damage, both the Etherian and their non-Etherian partner. Kai felt sick. I didn't know. It is not something we discuss openly with other species, Jor said. It has led to misunderstandings in the past. The implication was clear. Non-Etherians, not understanding the true nature of the bond, had tried to circumvent it with disastrous consequences. Thank you for explaining, Kai said, rising from his seat. I appreciate your candor. Jor remained seated, his silver eyes fixed on Kai's face. Engineer Kai, I feel I must be direct. Your interest in this topic seems more than academic. If you have developed personal feelings for Liaison Aria, I strongly advise you to reconsider any plans to interfere with her bond ceremony. Kai froze, caught off guard by the Etherian's perceptiveness. I don't. Please, Jor interrupted, his tone softer now. I have served on Aurora 7 for 7 years. I have seen the way humans look when they are in love. It is not so different from how Etherian's skin glows. He rose to stand face to face with Kai. I do not say this to cause you pain, but to prevent greater suffering. The bond is not merely cultural, it is biological necessity. Without it, an adult Etherian's neurochemistry becomes increasingly unstable. Within a year of refusing the bond, they begin to experience cognitive decline, emotional dysregulation, and eventually, neural collapse. You're saying she would die, Kai said numbly. Yes, Jor confirmed. Slowly and painfully. Is that what you would wish for her? Of course not, Kai whispered. Then let her go, Jor said, not unkindly. Honor what you have shared by accepting what cannot be. Kai left the meeting with Jor feeling hollowed out. Every avenue he explored led to the same conclusion. The soul bond was inevitable, and any attempt to circumvent it would only cause greater pain for Aria. And yet, as the days passed and their remaining time together dwindled, Kai found himself unable to simply surrender. There had to be another option, not fighting against the bond itself, but perhaps finding a way to work within the Etherian system. A compromise that would allow Aria to fulfill her biological needs without completely severing what they had built together. With little more than a month left before Aria's scheduled departure, Kai made a decision that would either save their relationship or destroy it entirely. He would petition the Etherian High Council directly, asking not for an exemption from the bond, but for a postponement long enough to explore alternatives. It was a desperate move, one that risked angering both the Etherian authorities and Aria herself if she saw it as interference. But Kai couldn't face the alternative, standing by passively as the woman he loved was taken from him, not just physically, but emotionally. Her feelings for him diminished to mere memory. With Dr. Mara's reluctant assistance, he composed a formal petition to the Etherian High Council, citing precedents for bond postponements and proposing a research initiative to study whether the neurological benefits of the bond might be achieved through other means for Etherians serving long-term off-world assignments. It was a long shot, framed in the language of scientific inquiry rather than personal plea. But beneath the formal terminology and careful citations, the truth was clear. This was a man fighting for the woman he loved, using every tool at his disposal. 3 days after submitting his petition, Kai received a response, not from the High Council, but from Aria herself. She was waiting outside his quarters when he returned from his shift, her skin pulsing with agitated patterns he'd never seen before. Sharp bursts of red, deep violet, flashes of almost white-hot silver. "How could you?" she demanded, as soon as he appeared, her normally melodic voice tight with emotion. "Going behind my back to petition the council? Do you have any idea what you've done?" Kai felt his stomach drop. "Aria, I can explain." "Explain what?" she interrupted, moving closer, her skin flashing with increasingly erratic patterns. "How you decided to interfere with something you cannot possibly understand. How you presume to know better than my entire species what is right for me. I wasn't trying to stop the bond, Kai protested. Just to postpone it, to give us time to find alternatives. There are no alternatives, Arya's voice rose, drawing curious glances from passers-by. Noticing this, she lowered her tone, but not her intensity. Do you think my people haven't spent generations researching this? The bond exists for a reason. Kai, without it, adult Etherians eventually suffer neural collapse. I know, Kai said quickly. Jor told me. But there must be treatments. Temporary measures. Palliative care, at best. Delaying the inevitable while watching the person you claim to love slowly lose their mind. Her skin rippled with bitter indigo. Is that what you want for me? The accusation hit Kai like a physical blow. No, of course not. I can't accept that there's no other way. Because you're human, Arya said, her voice suddenly tired. You believe every problem has a solution if you just try hard enough. If you just refuse to give up. Her skin settled into a sad, deep blue. But some things simply are, Kai. The bond is part of what makes me Etherian. Asking me to find a way around it is like asking me to stop breathing and find an alternative to oxygen. Kai felt the fight drain out of him, replaced by shame and regret. I'm sorry, he said softly. I should have talked to you first. I couldn't bear the thought of losing you. Arya's expression softened slightly, her skin warming to a more familiar blue. I understand that, but this petition, it's created complications. The Council now questions my judgment, my emotional stability. They're considering recalling me immediately rather than waiting until my assignment ends. What? Kai felt a fresh wave of horror. No, that's not what I wanted. I'll withdraw it immediately. Tell them it was all my idea. It's not that simple, Arya sighed. Once questions about bond readiness are raised, they must be addressed. I've been ordered to undergo an evaluation with the Etherian medical attaché tomorrow. This is my fault, Kai said, the full consequences of his actions sinking in. I was trying to buy us more time, and instead I might have cut short what little we had left. Arya was quiet for a moment, her skin cycling through complex patterns before settling into a calmer blue. Your intentions were good, even if your actions were misguided. She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the slight static charge that always surrounded Etherians. But Kai, you have to understand, this is bigger than us. The bond isn't just tradition or policy, it's survival. I know that now, he said, and I swear, I'll do whatever I can to fix this. I'll tell the Council I acted without your knowledge, that you're fully committed to the bond. No, Arya interrupted, surprising him. No more acting alone. If we're going to navigate this, we do it together. She reached out, her cool fingers lightly touching his hand. I have to attend this evaluation, and whatever happens afterward, we face it together. Agreed? Despite everything. Kai felt a small flicker of hope at her words, not for a miracle solution, but for the chance to at least face whatever came next with honesty between them. Agreed, he said, gently squeezing her hand. The next day, Arya underwent her evaluation while Kai waited anxiously in his quarters, unable to focus on work or anything else. When she finally contacted him, her message was brief. Meet me at the observation deck, now. He found her in the same spot where, weeks earlier, he had first confessed his love. She stood looking out at the stars, her back straight, her skin shifting through subtle blues and violets. Arya, he called softly as he approached. She turned, and to his surprise, her skin brightened with amber warmth. Not the reaction he had expected after what must have been a difficult evaluation. The Council has made their decision, she said without preamble. Kai braced himself for the worst. And? They've granted a temporary postponement of my bond ceremony, she said, her voice carefully neutral, despite the hopeful colors rippling across her skin. Not because of your petition, but because the medical attaché determined that my current work here is emotionally significant enough that abrupt severance might cause psychological distress. Kai could hardly believe what he was hearing. How long? 6 months, Arya said. I'll remain on Aurora 7 to complete an extended diplomatic assignment. After that time, I must return to Etheria for the ceremony. No further extensions will be considered. 6 months, half a year. It seemed both a gift beyond measure and cruelly insufficient. What does this mean for us? Kai asked, afraid to hope but unable to stop himself. Arya moved closer, her silver eyes searching his face. It means we have time, Kai. Time to be together, to learn more about each other. Time to see if there might be a way forward that honors both my biology and what we feel for each other. But after 6 months? I don't know, she admitted, her skin shifting to contemplative lavender. The bond will still be necessary eventually. But perhaps there are compromises neither of us has considered yet. Ways to maintain our connection, even after I am bonded. It wasn't a perfect solution. The fundamental problem remained. The bond would still alter Arya's feelings, still diminish what they had built together. But it was time, precious time that they hadn't had before. 6 months, Kai repeated, a smile spreading across his face, despite the uncertainty that still loomed in their future. I'll take it. Arya's skin brightened to golden amber, her own version of a smile. There's something else, she said, her voice softening. Something I should have told you on the observation deck when you first confessed your feelings. What is it? Kai asked, his heart suddenly racing. You said you loved me, Arya reminded him. And I told you that you couldn't, that our policies don't allow exceptions. Her skin rippled with warm, complex patterns. But I never told you how I felt in return. Kai held his breath, hardly daring to hope. I cannot say the words as you did, Arya continued. In my culture, to speak of love outside the bond is not done, but I can show you. She held out her hand, palm up. When Kai placed his hand in hers, her skin began to glow with an intensity he had never seen before, pulsing with deep gold, rose, amber, colors shifting and blending in patterns too complex to follow. This, she said softly, is what my people cannot hide from each other, what our skin reveals against our will. It is why we need no words for certain emotions. They are written on our bodies for all to see. Kai stared at the beautiful display, understanding dawning. This is how you feel about me? Arya nodded, her silver eyes luminous. Now you know why the medical attaché granted the postponement. Even they could not deny the evidence written on my skin. Overwhelmed. Kai gently pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her in a careful embrace. Her body felt cool against his, her skin still pulsing with those beautiful, telling colors. We'll figure this out, he promised, together. For a long moment, they stood there in the starlight, holding each other as the station continued its eternal orbit. The future remained uncertain. The bond still waited, along with all its complications. But for now, they had this moment, and the promise of 6 months more. As they finally drew apart, Arya's skin settled into a serene amber glow. Let's use this time well, she said, her voice warm with emotion she could now acknowledge. Let's learn everything we can about each other, about our peoples. If there is a way forward for us, we'll find it. Kai nodded, hope blooming in his chest despite all the obstacles they still faced. One day at a time. One day at a time, Arya agreed. Her smile, that wonderful smile that had first captured his heart, returning to her face. Outside the viewport, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the tiny lives that observed them. But within the observation deck of Aurora 7, two beings from different worlds had found a connection that transcended their differences, fragile perhaps, and facing challenges neither fully understood, but real nonetheless. And for now, that was enough. 3 months later, Kai and Arya stood before the Etherian High Council, their hands clasped tightly together as they awaited judgment. The council chamber, a vast crystalline dome on Etheria's capital platform, hummed with the collective consciousness of the 12 council members, their skin shifting in synchronized patterns as they communed telepathically. Getting to this point had not been easy. They had spent their precious time researching, consulting experts from a dozen worlds, and finally developing a proposal, a modified bond ritual that would allow Arya to fulfill her biological need while preserving her emotional connection to Kai. The science was experimental, drawing on recent advances in xenoneurology and the discovery that certain aspects of the bond could be directed, focused, rather than allowing it to subsume all previous emotional attachments. If successful, Arya would still bond with her matched Etherian partner, maintaining the neural stability her biology required. But a portion of her emotional capacity would remain independent, allowing her relationship with Kai to continue, albeit in a modified form. It was unprecedented, controversial, and far from guaranteed to work, but it was their best hope. The head counselor, an ancient Etherian whose translucent skin had faded to almost pure white with age, finally spoke, her voice resonating through the chamber. "We have reviewed your proposal, Liaison Arya and Engineer Kai of Aurora 7. Never before has such a modification to the sacred bond been attempted." Her skin rippled with complex patterns, too subtle for Kai to interpret. "It challenges our most fundamental beliefs about the nature and purpose of the bond." Kai felt Arya's hand tighten around his, her skin cooling with anxiety. "And yet," the counselor continued, "our society has always valued adaptation. The very cities we inhabit shift and change with the atmospheric currents. Perhaps it is time our understanding of the bond evolves as well." Murmurs rippled through the chamber, the skin of the gathered Etherians pulsing with surprised patterns. "Therefore, we grant provisional approval for this experimental procedure, subject to extensive monitoring and the right to terminate the experiment if any sign of neural degradation appears." The counselor's silver eyes fixed on Arya. "You understand the risks that this may fail, leaving you with neither a complete bond nor your emotional attachment to the human?" "I understand," Arya replied, her voice steady despite the nervous flickers of her skin. "And I accept those risks." The counselor nodded solemnly. "Then we will make the necessary arrangements. The modified bond ceremony will take place at the next lunar alignment, 14 Earth days from now." As they left the council chamber, stepping out onto one of the floating crystal platforms that comprised Etheria's capital city, Kai finally released the breath he felt he'd been holding throughout the entire hearing. "I can't believe they agreed," he said, gazing out at the spectacular vista before them, crystalline structures drifting among perpetual clouds, catching and refracting the light of Etheria's two suns. Arya's skin pulsed with cautious amber hope. "It's only a provisional approval. The real challenge lies ahead." She turned to face him, her silver eyes serious. "Kai, you need to understand, even if this works perfectly, what we have will change. I will still bond with Navan. He will still share a part of my mind that you cannot." Kai nodded, having come to terms with this compromise during their months of research. "I know, and I can accept that. As long as some part of you still remembers what we feel for each other. As long as we still have a chance." Arya's skin brightened with that beautiful amber glow he'd come to associate with her deepest emotions. "Then, let's make the most of these 14 days. I want to show you Etheria, all the places that made me who I am. For the next 2 weeks, They explored Arya's homeworld together, the floating crystal cities that shifted with the wind currents, the bioluminescent cloud forests where Etherian children learned to manipulate their skin colors, the ancient meditation chambers where the first bond ceremonies had been performed thousands of years ago. Throughout their journey, Kai was struck by the beauty and strangeness of Etherian society, so different from human individualism, yet with its own profound wisdom. He began to understand why the bond was so central to their way of life, how it created the collective harmony that allowed their civilization to thrive in this hostile but beautiful environment. He also met Navan, Arya's bond match, a thoughtful, reserved Etherian scientist whose skin patterns showed none of the jealousy or resentment Kai had feared. Instead, Navan approached their unprecedented situation with scholarly curiosity, even helping refine the modified bond procedure based on his extensive neurological research. Your connection with Arya has shown us possibilities we never considered, Navan told Kai during one of their increasingly frequent conversations. If this succeeds, it could transform how Etherians interact with other species throughout the galaxy. The night before the ceremony, Kai and Arya stood on a private viewing platform overlooking the vast gas giant's swirling atmosphere. Tomorrow would determine everything, whether their bold experiment would succeed, whether they had found a way to bridge the vast biological and cultural gap between their species. "Are you afraid?" Kai asked softly, watching as the perpetual storms below created breathtaking patterns of light and shadow. Arya was quiet for a moment, her skin shifting through thoughtful blues and violets. "Yes," she finally admitted, "but not of the ceremony itself." She turned to face him, her silver eyes reflecting the dancing lights below. "I'm afraid of losing this, the way I feel when I'm with you. The person I've become since meeting you." Kai took her hands in his, marveling as always at how her skin pulsed with emotion at his touch. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you've changed me too, permanently. No bond or ritual can undo that." "Promise me something," Arya said, her voice suddenly urgent. "If the procedure fails, if I bond fully with Navan and my feelings for you fade, don't stay. Don't torture yourself trying to reconnect with someone who can't fully remember what we had." The thought was painful, but Kai nodded. "I promise, but only if you promise something in return." "What?" she asked. "If it works, if we find a way to make this unprecedented relationship function, promise you'll be patient with me as I learn to share you with Navan, as I learn to be part of something I don't fully understand." Arya's skin glowed with warm amber, her version of a smile. "I promise." She reached up, gently touching his face. "Humans always think they need to understand everything. Sometimes, Kai, it's enough just to experience." The next morning arrived with the dual sunrise that made Etheria's cloud layer shimmer with rainbow hues. Kai was escorted to the ancient Bond Temple, a crystalline structure that seemed to float unsupported above a particularly turbulent section of the planet's atmosphere. Inside, the circular chamber was filled with Etherians, their skin pulsing in synchronized patterns as they prepared for the ceremony. Navan stood at the center, his expression calm, his skin glowing with ritual indigo. And beside him stood Arya, draped in traditional Etherian attire that enhanced, rather than concealed, the chromatic emotions playing across her skin. When she saw Kai, her skin brightened momentarily with that warm amber glow he'd come to love, before settling back into the ritual patterns required for the ceremony. The procedure itself was unlike anything Kai had witnessed before, part ritual, part medical procedure, part something almost mystical. Ancient chants in the melodic Etherian language blended with the hum of advanced neurological equipment. Arya and Navan stood facing each other, their foreheads touching, while specialized technicians monitored the progress of the bond formation. Kai watched from a designated observation area, his heart racing as he tried to interpret the shifting colors and patterns that flowed between Arya and Nevan. This was the moment of truth. Would the modified procedure work, allowing Arya to bond with Nevan while preserving her emotional connection to Kai? Or would the traditional bond assert itself, subsuming all previous attachments as it had for countless generations of Etherians? Hours passed, the ritual continuing without interruption. Kai remained motionless, barely breathing, as he watched the woman he loved undergo a transformation he could only partially comprehend. Finally, as Etheria's twin suns began to set, the ceremony concluded. The gathered Etherians stepped back, their skin pulsing with patterns that even Kai could recognize as surprise and wonder. Something unprecedented had occurred, but whether success or failure, he couldn't tell. Nevan was the first to step away, his skin glowing with a serene blue that suggested the bond had taken hold. But Arya remained still, her back to Kai, her skin cycling through complex patterns too rapid for him to interpret. Slowly, she turned to face him. For a heart-stopping moment, Kai saw no recognition in her silver eyes, no special brightening of her skin. Had they failed? Had the bond erased what they had built together? Then, gradually, her skin began to glow, not with the full spectrum of emotions she had shown before, but with a distinct amber warmth that he recognized immediately. Her smile translated into the chromatic language of her species. "Kai," she said softly, her voice carrying across the now silent chamber. He stepped forward, hardly daring to hope. "Arya, do you remember?" She nodded, her skin pulsing with that beautiful amber light. "Not everything, not with the same intensity. But yes, I remember." She glanced at Nevan, who nodded encouragingly, his own skin showing patterns of calm acceptance. "I am bonded to Nevan now. I feel his thoughts, his presence in my mind. But there is still room for you, Kai. Still room for what we built together." Kai moved forward, crossing the ceremonial space until he stood before her. Up close, he could see the subtle changes in her eyes, in the patterns of her skin, evidence of the profound neural transformation she had undergone. She was different now, irrevocably changed by the bond. And yet, when she reached out to take his hand, her skin still brightened at his touch. Different, yes, but not gone, not forgotten. "It worked," he whispered, hardly believing it despite the evidence before him. "It worked," she confirmed, her voice carrying a new harmony, as if Nevan's consciousness added subtle undertones to her words. "Not perfectly, not completely, but enough." "Enough," Kai agreed, a smile spreading across his face despite the tears that threatened to fall. More than enough. The path ahead would not be easy. They were venturing into uncharted territory, a human in a relationship with a bonded Etherian, navigating complexities no couple had faced before. There would be challenges, adjustments, moments of doubt and difficulty. But as Arya's skin glowed with that familiar amber warmth, as her hand held his, with the same gentle pressure, he remembered. Kai knew they had achieved something remarkable. Against all odds, across the vast gulf of biological difference and cultural tradition, they had found a way to preserve what mattered most. "What happens now?" he asked softly. Arya glanced at Nevan, some unspoken communication passing between them through their new bond. Then she turned back to Kai, her silver eyes warm with emotion. "Now," she said, "we create something new, something that has never existed before." Her skin rippled with determination and hope. "I will divide my time between Etheria and Aurora 7. Nevan's research will bring him to the station frequently as well. We will build this relationship day by day, discovering its shape as we go." Nevan stepped forward, his own skin pulsing with calm blue acceptance. The bond I share with Arya is different from what she shares with you, Kai of Earth. Neither is lesser. They are simply different. I believe there is room in the universe for both to exist. Kai looked between them, overwhelmed by the generosity and open-mindedness they were showing. "Thank you," he said, the words feeling wholly inadequate. "Both of you." As they left the Bond Temple together, the three of them walking side by side into the rainbow-hued sunset of Etheria, Kai felt a profound sense of possibility. What they were attempting might fail. The modified bond might prove unstable over time. The emotional complexities might prove too difficult to navigate. But they had already achieved what had seemed impossible. They had challenged tradition, biology, and cultural expectations, and found a compromise that honored all three. The coming months and years would not be easy. There would be struggles, misunderstandings, moments of jealousy and doubt. But there would also be joy, discovery, and a kind of love that transcended the boundaries between worlds. As the crystal cities of Etheria floated around them, shifting in the evening currents, Kai reached for Arya's hand. Her skin brightened at his touch, that beautiful amber glow that had first captured his heart so many months ago on a distant space station. "One day at a time?" he asked softly. Arya smiled. That same smile that had once been just a human expression she had learned, but now carried the weight of everything they had been through together. "One day at a time," she agreed. And together, they stepped into the unknown future they had fought so hard to create. A future where love might find its way even across the vast gulfs between stars, between species, between fundamentally different ways of being. A future where her smile, and all it represented, would remain a constant in his life, changed perhaps, but never forgotten.